What about the topics? Did you want to start anywhere in particular?
I was thinking, as you were saying, I was thinking about more about our journey, if you like, and the things that we've come across, or the things that haunt us, maybe.
Oh God! Well, I woke up in the middle of the night last night, haunted by some of the stuff I'd heard yesterday. It was a particularly harrowing day.
Oh
But
God,
yeah, we could maybe talk about that at some point. But that's how it goes, isn't it, in this line of work?
it is. You never know what's going to come out until it happens, really. You know, no matter what you start with, you start at one point and you end up somewhere completely different. You
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of unpredictability, and what you also don't know is a combination of clients on a particular day. If all five or six of them have something very heavy
Yeah,
going on, then it sort of builds in your mind, doesn't it? The
it
weight of
does.
that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because it's not like a robot where you kind of go in, you do a session, and then you end the session and you start anew. Everything carries over, doesn't it?
Does, and it doesn't matter how much you talk about being neutral or detached from a client. We're human, aren't we? So we absorb it.
Yes, indeed. And I think that for a lot of young people coming into the business, it's not something that they readily understand. Because you'll go into that, yeah, the training and all the theory and the academic stuff, but then you don't really start learning until you get in front of a client. That's where the learning takes place. And for people who are not necessarily aware or haven't been made aware by the organisations that train about all these things, then it can be really harrowing, you know.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, yeah. You've got 10 supervisees, people you look after.
Mm.
So are some of them quite young? I mean, 20s, 30s?
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
some
some within training or placements.
yes.
They're not all
Likewise.
qualified counsellors yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, same for me. But let me ask you this question, sort of a personal question, I suppose. How old were you when you came into counselling and therapy?
I was about, I think, 40 when I first considered the options, you
Yeah,
know. And now I'm kind of coming up to 70. So I've kind of been 30 years
yeah,
inside the
yeah,
business.
yeah. Well, you beat me by 10 years. I came into this when I was 47, now 65 or something like that. But so you came in at an age, you were quite mature. You worked in other roles, you'd experienced things, relationships and different environments. But if you come into this when you're 20 and you're 30, then it's got to be different, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And for those people, I think it's more the understanding of having a career. Because obviously they need a career, they need money, they need income usually. And so from that point of view, they see it as a job, a role, a function. Whereas probably me, when I first started, you looked at it as a vocation. It was something you did as well as
Yeah,
something else. Yeah, it was a top up, if you like, on your day or your week. You know,
yeah,
and I think if people look at it as a career, then they think of it as a job, a role, a function, and then they think of it as they would think of any career. Well, you start off at basic wage, you do 40 hours, you can live and pay your rent and all those kind of things. And I think it's sometimes a baptism of fire when they realise they can't, you know.
no, yeah. So you were balancing different jobs when you came into this. I mean, like me, I guess you were managing the finances. You couldn't do this completely straight away because it just wouldn't have given enough income.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah,
So it was kind of like a transition. And I think that's the best way to look at it. A transition from what you would normally do into this world. And that can take 3, 4, 5 years,
Yes.
you know, dependent on what your income is and how much you need to live on, you know.
Yeah. I think the training now, the basic training to get you to say level 5 takes about 3 years if you're doing it properly.
Yeah, yeah.
But did you
But
like
you're
me?
moving through that. Go on.
I was gonna say, did you like me come in at the start with Relate because that's where we met? But did you do something before that?
Yeah, I did a certificate with Leeds Uni,
Ah, right. Okay.
which was kind of 1 day a week kind of thing, you know. And that gave me a background, if you like, and understanding whether I would like the work of counselling, you know. And I was going through a divorce at the time, or just before, and so I was kind of immersed in that process and thought that might be something I could help somebody else with, you know. So I kind of like did the year with Leeds Uni at Bretton Hall, and then I did an introduction to Relate because I thought if I'm looking at divorce, separation, marriages, all those kind of things, then Relate at that time was the only provider, you know, in the country, or the national provider in the country. And so I kind of went with them and did their training as well, because obviously couple work is completely different to individual work, you know.
Indeed, yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah. Well, I came in directly with Relate and consider myself very fortunate because in those days they were still running what I call a proper course.
Yeah.
And we went to the Relate institution over at Doncaster College, Melton, and I think it was 10 weekends over a year, so 20 days,
Mm.
and it was really solid learning, really good, quality training.
Mm. Yeah.
I'm not making a comment on or a judgment about learning with therapy now. I'm sure it's still very good. My recent experience of it was that it's still very good. But for example, Relate don't do that anymore, do they? They don't.
No, the defunct
Yeah,
have gone
yeah.
into liquidation, you know.
It's a major shame because there was a lot of expertise and experience embodied in that setup, wasn't there?
There was, and obviously fairly targeted to family and couple work, naturally, you know, which is a specialism. It is a niche market, you know, for our work, definitely, because it involves a lot more skills, a lot more abilities than just individual counselling, really, because of the different needs, different requirements, different ideas that people got within that interconnected relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think same as you, really, Steve. You know, I think Relate for me gave me such a grounding in all sorts of stuff. To be fair, and very solid training with solid support. You know, that it enabled me to cut my teeth, so
Yeah.
to speak.
Yeah.
You know, on the work. But at my time, you went into the placement, and then the placement put you forward for the training. So
All
then
right.
you had
Yeah.
that link, you know, and then you would kind of do 3 weekends, I think it was, and then you would start looking at working with people in the office, and doing couple work or individual work, depending on what came through the door. And that was something that then you started to progress with, you know. I always remember my first evening at Wakefield in the Relay office, and the first couple that I saw, one was a psychiatrist, and
Wow.
the other one,
Okay.
and the other one was a psychologist,
Oh my word.
and they were both kind of mid 40s, 50s, that kind of area of their life, And I said to my supervisor at the time, I said, what do I do with this? These people have been doing this for donkey's years. I'm new. I've had 3 weekends. What can I give them? And my supervisor at the time said, well, they're here because they want help and they can't sort it themselves. So whatever skills they've got ain't working, you know. And that kind of reassured me a bit, but I was still scared.
Yes. Yeah, I remember experiencing imposter syndrome quite a lot in those early days. If a psychologist came in or a GP came in, because one imbues that sort of person and that profession with a lot of knowledge and a lot of skills, but in fact, they were just as vulnerable to relationship challenges as anybody else.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think
Which
it
I
learned me though
learned,
that no matter. Sorry, go on, Steve.
which I learned over time. It took me a while to, get that on, take that on board.
Mm. I think it showed me though early on that you can't be objective in your own relationships. So it doesn't matter how much skill you've got, how much knowledge you've got around the process. In your own relationships, you can't use them. And I think that was a valuable lesson that I learned. You know, certainly with the next couple that walked through the door, I was a lot more solid.
Well, you certainly went in at the deep end, and that's sometimes a good way of learning, isn't it? It keeps you on your toes and makes you really consider what you're doing.
Mm.
Better
Yeah.
to be that than complacent or in some way feeling overconfident or even superior.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. I kind of like hear these words bandied around nowadays on forums and counselling groups of the imposter syndrome and how that's a negative process. The worry, the concern, and I always say to people, in my world, it's not a negative process. It's a positive process because if I'm constantly reflecting to see if I'm okay in doing what I do, I think that's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. So the fact that I don't know or I can't know keeps me connected to the client in their world, because they don't know, you know.
No.
So I think that imposter syndrome, people kind of say about it being a negative experience. I think it's a massively positive experience which keeps our feet on the ground and stops us going into this expert stance and this place where we're in a weird, wonderful world,
I think that's an excellent way of thinking about it. I hadn't considered that before, but yes, it could. It is, as we're acknowledging, useful to be in that situation because you have to think really carefully. But a lot of that is about expectations, isn't it? People have such high expectations of what they should be able to do.
Mm.
And well, we can speculate where that all might come from, but even for people that have done the training, still feel like that.
Mm. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to remember that. Thank you. That was a really good tip. Imposter syndrome, the place to be.
Yeah, and I think it does keep us anchored because we're constantly thinking, are we good enough?
Yeah.
Which anchors me to that process of saying, actually, I need to keep that in mind. I mean, the clients presumably think we're good enough because they keep coming back, which is always helpful. But I think it's nice to keep that as a solid foundation for me, with it.
Yeah, no, it's a good thought to have. I mean, I tend to come at it from a slightly different angle, which is that we never know everything. We're never experts in anything, and we're always learning. And certainly in the world of therapy, there's always new ideas, books that you haven't read, uh, adaptations to the modern world.
Yeah.
There's all of that constant learning. Well, this is why we have CPD and supervision, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I always remember one of my first supervisors, a lady called Pam, a lovely lady, very, very knowledgeable. And she said to me when I was having supervision, she said, "Ian, are you a good counsellor?" And back in the day, you weren't allowed to say that. You would say things like, "Oh, you'd have to ask my clients," and all that kind of stuff. And she said, "No, you're not getting out of this room unless you answer yes or no. There's only two answers, yes or no." And
Right.
I had clients straight after, so I'm looking at my watch because clients will be waiting in the waiting room, you know. And I said, "I think I am." And she said, "That's the right answer, Ian." I said, "Yeah, but that's egotistical, isn't it? Building myself up and making me more important." And she said, "No." And these were the wise words. She said, "Ego is in comparison, never in confidence." And that stayed with me all these years.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, that is so profound. You
Mm.
know, it's okay to be confident in what you do.
Yeah.
It's wrong to judge yourself against somebody else or compare yourself to somebody else.
I see. So it's important to be, uh, as you say, confident with your skills and your competence and so on. But it's not a particularly healthy thing to have an ego where you're comparing yourself, making yourself more superior to other people. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it kind of stayed with me all the way through that one.
Yeah.
It's okay to say you're good at something. It's not okay you say you're better than somebody else.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly okay to say that you're good enough at something, isn't it?
Mm, mm, yeah. And that's all you can ever be, isn't it? Good enough.
I
That's
think
that's all
so.
you
But
need to be.
that's all you need to be. Yeah.
Mm,
Good enough
mm,
to manage this role ethically, competently, good enough to support clients. Absolutely.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a weird thing, but you could say good enough is perfect.
yeah. Oh, I don't know perfect. I don't like perfect.
Perfect in the sense that that term embodies that you accept that you're never going to be absolutely perfect or superior or the best. It means you've accepted that there's always going to be things you can improve on and develop.
Mm, absolutely. We'll get people coming in to see us clients, and they'll have had an experience with another therapist maybe, and one of the first questions I ask is, "Have you had therapy before? And if it was okay, or did you get anything from it?" Because I don't want to follow the same path as the previous therapist, and they say, "Well, you're as bad as they were, or as good as they were," or whatever judgment they make. So I kind of like ask that as a first question on the assessment. And for me, that makes it a lot easier to work with the client, because I don't think anybody is a level with our work. I think people will give things to me that they won't give to other people, and vice versa. They won't give things to me that they'll give to other people. And it's the relationship, isn't it? It's that therapeutic bonding, as we call it, to say that I trust you enough to tell you this. And for me, that's the bit that makes it work, you know?
Yeah.
Because without that, people just don't tell us. You know?
Yeah, you're a big fan of the relational depth aspect of therapy, building that alliance and uh, yeah, achieving success through that. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's the cornerstone of what we do in it, you know? Because if
I,
people don't trust us, they won't tell us, will they?
no, I think it's really core to what we do. Absolutely. Yeah,
Mm.
but I wouldn't, and I'm sure you wouldn't exclude other approaches that you can hang off that, because we talk about doing work on a client's history, we talk about doing cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma work. But you're right, that core relationship has to be reasonably healthy to start with to do all of that.
I think so. Which is kind of the Rogers thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
The core conditions, if you
very
like.
much so. Yeah,
You know.
yeah,
And I don't necessarily, for me, it doesn't matter what modality people use, because there's lots and lots of different ways of working, which are all valid in my world.
yeah,
I think if we've got that cornerstone of the relationship, then that's the information passing, gathering process that we need in order to work, really.
yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a foundation. But I would say it's not the only thing. Some people, I've had a couple of supervisees actually that have come off courses where the modality that's taught is Rogers person-centered therapy, and they don't have any other tools in their box. They just have that relationship building, and I don't think it provides all the answers.
No, absolutely not. Because people will want different things, won't they? They might want psychodynamic because they want to go into their past to see how it presents in the present. They might want CBT because they don't want to do feelings, emotions. They just want process. In a sense. They might want TA. So there's a lot of different modalities that work, and integrative modalities that you can use this bit and that bit and the other bit to put together a package, if you like, for that client. But I would imagine the trust in your area of specialism is massively important.
I think the trust aspect is important, as we were both acknowledging all therapy. But I'm just interested in your question. What makes you ask that question?
I'm thinking more of the kind of the sexual addiction stuff that has got all that
right.
stigma around it and all that kind of
Yes.
guilt and shame and all that stuff that goes into it.
No, I'm with you all the way on that one. Yes. Maybe I've become a little bit, I've normalized it now after 13 years of working in this line of work. But yeah, people have to share some very intimate and very personal things about themselves. But, they don't have to spill all, as it were. I say to them right from the start, you tell me things when you feel ready to tell me. And you don't have to tell me things at all if you don't want to.
Yeah.
But you're right, yeah. But I mean, you have this as well in your work because you deal with relationships, you deal with the sexual side, the intimacy side of relationships. It's the same in that area, I guess.
It has, and we stray into certain areas similar,
Yeah.
Certainly when you've done the work for so long that we've done it, you get into all sorts of areas, that might have been a bit kind of weird to start with or scary to start with, or you didn't feel you were skilled enough to work with in the beginning of our work history, whereas now we do, and we're open to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think alongside that imposter syndrome that I experienced was the idea that to be a good therapist, you need to have experienced everything. And I've not experienced marital breakup. I've not experienced divorce. At that time, I hadn't experienced any significant bereavements. So I felt a bit sort of light on experience. But then it's just silly, isn't it? Because it's like saying a pilot needs to have experienced a crash before they're good pilots.
No, that's a good way of putting it. Absolutely. Yeah. Because you don't, do you?
You can't have experienced everything. You can't know everything.
Absolutely not. No. And I think if you've experienced the kind of dynamic of something, so if for example you've lost your job So you've got that grief, that process of change, that kind of dropping down into the gutter kind of thing, you know. Then that dynamic of grief, if you like, and loss and rejection, I think you can use that in other areas of people's worlds and lives. So you can understand somebody dying, for example,
Yeah.
and losing somebody, because you've got some of those core feelings and emotions, if you like. But I don't think you have to actually have experienced it, you know.
No, you're right. A lot of these experiences are transferable, aren't they? Lots, it's transferable between, as you say, losing a job or losing a relationship or losing somebody to death. A similar emotions, similar feelings.
Indeed. I mean, there might be a massively different process, but they have some core similarities.
Yeah. I think we've got on our list the lost topic. I think that will make a good topic to talk about and something that we can share with people who might be watching who are experiencing that or where it's part of their history and is still having a negative impact on them.
Mm, mm, yeah. Yeah, somebody asked me the other day, do we ever get over anything? And I thought that was really interesting because the conversation we had said, well, we don't get over things. We become kind of okay with it, but we don't get over it because you'll always remember these traumatic incidents, usually, and you'll be able to come back to them, but they won't affect you in the same way. They I kind of like explain it as a bouncing ball. So when you first drop the ball, it bounces to somewhere near where you dropped it from. And then it drops lower, 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 lower. And the time in between gets longer and longer, But I don't think it ever goes away.
No, that's a really nice metaphor. And what strikes me about that is the ball is still there. The ball hasn't gone away. It's just not bouncing.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then at certain times, maybe anniversaries or times when you reconnect with the feelings for whatever reason, then the ball might bounce again a bit, but it probably won't bounce as high as it did the first time.
Yeah. Or it might roll. It might roll a little bit. Or, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a nice metaphor to use.
Mm.
I think we've also got on our list, coming back to relationships, that topic, and maybe talking about some of the sexual side, intimacy side. I think that's something that people do struggle with.
Yeah, including counsellors.
Including counsellors. Yeah, well, as I said before, we're not robots, we're humans.
No. When I'm doing the kind of couple training that I used to do, I don't do anything like nowadays what I used to. I'm getting older. But I used to say to people, if you don't mention that it's okay to talk about it, the clients in a couple work will probably not talk about it. So in the first 1 or 2 sessions, then say, if it needs to be talked about, the intimacy in your relationship, I'm okay with that, and we can come back to it any time you want. Because I think there's that natural fear from the counsellor's point of view that I'm going to talk about something that's a bit, weird, a bit risky, a bit uncomfortable, and that process means that the clients probably won't engage with that conversation because the counsellor doesn't feel comfortable with it, and it's a really amazing process when people start getting that conversation about taboos, about your stigmas, about what is okay, what is not okay culturally, all that kind of stuff. And we're talking about sex, and it's like, ooh, can't talk about that.
Yeah, certainly not to somebody else. If I can't talk to my partner about it, then I certainly can't talk to somebody else. Unless I had a few beers and I'm down at the pub and talking to the lads or the girls. Yeah. But it's a strange topic, I think, because we like to think of ourselves as very sexually liberal and open. and confident, but actually people aren't. There's a lot of masking there, a big facade, which I notice when my clients come for work. They present as, sort of regular, even macho guys, but they really struggle with this topic, really struggle. Because they've been brought up in a history of, don't talk about that. No, just push it under there,
Yeah, and we're not given that language to explore it, are we? Yeah, we're given crude language. We're not given language to explore it in a adult way. It's kind of a sniggery, kind of behind the bike shed kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So you have either the slang or the biological terms that you learned when you were 13 in biology lessons. The bit in the middle, the really important bit, people avoid.
Yeah. It constantly amazes me when I'm working with couples and the intimacy comes up as part of the issues, the connection, the relationship. And, we'll start talking about what it is, intimacy. And not that it's just a physical sexual process. It's about a bonding, it's about connecting, it's about talking, sharing, emotionally bonding. Intimacy is a lot of things. And we'll start pulling that apart. And we'll get to a point where, the stereotypically, I'm not saying this isn't true for everybody, stereotypically the female will say, well, they only want to have sex. And, you say, oh, right, okay. What do you mean by that? And you'll have a conversation around it. So I'll say to the guy in a heterosexual couple, I'll say, so do you want to have sex or do you want to make love? And in 20 odd years of doing this, every single guy has said make love. And every single woman has gone, what? Completely amazed, But, what are you on about? That's not what you do. Well, I don't know how to make love. I just know how to have sex. But I'd love to make love. And it starts a whole different conversation,
Yeah. I think there's a whole discussion for us to have at some point about that, sharing things that people might find helpful. Another topic that people find tricky to talk about is trauma. I think that ought to be on our list to talk about. And I think it's sometimes difficult for therapists, like with the sex question, to also open up the question about trauma. So where clients mention in their assessment that this happened to them when they were a child or that happened to them when they were a teenager, I think there's a natural inclination to skirt around it and not talk about it.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I think that's from the counsellor's point of view, probably embarrassment.
Or being fearful of dealing with whatever comes out, which is that harrowing stuff that we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, and people don't ask the question if they don't want to know the answer, do they? I remember years ago, I was doing some contract work with Pudsey, the bear, and going into schools. And we'd put a project together in Leeds, and I was given 2 schools that I could choose that could have free counselling for kids for 5 hours a week each school. So that gave me 10 hours, and it had to be around children who at some point in their life had suffered through parents with domestic abuse.
Right.
So that's quite a wide range of stuff, obviously.
Yeah.
So I went into one school, which I won't name, and I said to their wellbeing practitioners, I said, look, this is a contract we've got. We can do this through the charity, and we can give you 5 hours a week, every week, and we can work this, but there has to be some element of DVA with the children. And that school went, come on in, we can give you this, we can give you that, we can do this, we can do that, we can do the other. Massively, really supportive process, which was fantastic. Yeah. Went to another school that was an academy, spoke to the well-being of the head teacher, and this is what I can give you. And the words the head teacher said to me, "That's no good for us." And I said, "Why?" And this school had 3,000 kids in it.
Yeah.
It's not a small school.
Big school, yeah.
And he said to me, because none of our children suffer from anything to do for DVA. 3,000 kids. And he knew every one of them had never suffered anything to do with DVA. And I said, well, that's great. That's fantastic. You're obviously not asking the question because you don't want to know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that absolutely amazing. That was free work they were given through the charity. And they didn't have anybody in 3,000 kids that's been affected by DVA now or in the past.
So that sounds like a major taboo for that individual or even that school to acknowledge that this sort of behaviour exists between couples, which then affects children. What a terrible statement, about a school to ignore that kind of damage. I hope schools are a bit more open to that sort of thing now. I'm sure they are.
I think so. I mean, this is going back a few years now. Probably about 15 years ago. But it just showed me that, if you don't ask the question, you don't have to deal with the answer.
So in our next chat, Psyche-Babble chat.
Psyche-Babble.
What topic would you go with? What do you think we should focus on next time?
I think the grief one's a good one.
Okay, yeah.
Because I think people see grief as somebody dying. I see grief as a wider context where any loss that we've incurred that we had no control of, i.e. we had no choice, then that to me has the same components, and I think it covers a lot. Grief and rejection, I think, is two major things for human beings to cope with and deal with. So I don't know, what do you think?
No, I'm with you all the way. I think it's one of those topics that frequently comes up because we all experience it, and we all experience it time after time in our lives, yet we tend to, certainly in the Western culture, pretend that it doesn't exist. It's another taboo topic. So yes, we can talk about that next time. I think that's an excellent idea.